Punk music is one of my all-time favorite genres of music, but even I can admit that there are certain things about punk music that I find boring. The 1990s brought about a new popularity to pop punk music, which had previously been an overlooked subgenre of punk, but since that point has been pretty much the most dominant style of punk music. That was until about 3 or 4 years ago when a few bands in the hardcore punk scene started to make some big moves and do some massive touring. Bands like Knocked Loose, Military Gun, and Turnstile shepherded in the next generation's wave of punk music, which to this point in music history hasn't really gotten its time in the spotlight. However, due to the crowds and sometimes their violent actions towards each other, and the music being more of a young crowd in general, it remains to be seen if the hardcore punk scene can bring back punk to the mainstream audiences in a new way. There's definitely been a lack of pop aesthetic in hardcore until recently, but that might just be the change it needs to bring this music subgenre to the masses. Still, there are many bands that still play melodic punk and skate punk and other fusions of punk that have been popular over the years. And over the past 30 years or so, this has kind of been the safe and most popular form of punk music. Today I'm going to be speaking with Gone Stereo from Long Island, which is a band that takes the concept of pop punk to new heights with their instrumentations and harmonies. And we'll discuss what the future of punk rock is and whether or not new bands can be upstreamed by the popularity of some of the current bands that are catching on right now. Also, we'll be talking about their brand new single, which just came out, so stay tuned and find out what they have to say. All right, here we have Gone Stereo from Long Island, New York. It's obviously, you guys are a punk band. You know, I just said in the intro that, you know, there's kind of been this surge in hardcore punk that's kind of keeping punk kind of more relevant right now, but there's always kind of been like pop punk, you know, going since like, you know, 1984, right? Like it's kind of been one of the more popular genres of punk. But let's talk about your guys' approach to punk music, because, you know, everybody has a little bit of a different take. And I think you guys, even for a pop punk band, as you claim, or a punk band, however you want to describe yourselves, but it's different than some pop punk. You know, you guys aren't just making the straight 4-bar chords, simple songs, right? You're doing a little bit extra with the songs. You're playing a little bit more strategically with the instrumentation. So what kind of sounds and styles are you guys trying to achieve when you actually go in and start creating the songs you guys make?
So really, you know, I'm glad you kind of brought up 1994, because you know, Matty and I and Josh and, you know, Danny's a little younger over here. Mike's our age as well, but we've all been kind of like bumming around playing this kind of music, you know, loosely pop punk for the better part of 30 years at this point.
Yeah.
So, you know, trying to find new things to do within the genre is always like, you know, almost like a puzzle. One of the things that Josh and I were really doing when we wrote the 3 or 4 songs that are about to come out, is we really sat down and we said, let's try to utilize 2 guitars in a way that you hear them. They both have distinct parts, yet, you know, Mike can anchor it down and Danny can anchor it down. And let's actually try to do that. Some of my favorite, you know, records are like, I don't want to say dueling guitars, because that's not really the case, but I really like the way that Hot Water Music always use their 2 guitars, and you know, the Offshoot, the Draft, or whatever. That kind of stuff I think is really interesting and you know, brings more to the table than just a vocal hook. You know what I mean? So, which is not to dismiss the vocal hook at all.
Yeah, I think like even like, you know, some of the synchronizing guitars and stuff like that, like playing, you know, the same little bit, you know, riff here and there to like really juice up a guitar lead or a guitar riff is pretty cool. You don't see that a lot with pop punk. You see that a lot with more like power pop or metal even, right? So like, was there a conscious decision to start playing like synchronized guitars and stuff like that, just to kind of bring that extra element of like, you know, kind of power to the songs?
Well, like, you know, always trying to bring it together on a big chorus or whatever like that, or at least trying to fit the part together to kick something off, to make it different than the previous part is always kind of the goal. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I think, you know, Frank, who we worked with for the last couple songs, really helped us with is kind of like, all right, let's do it a tiny bit different on this, you know, on this run through the verse rather than exactly the same. And, you know, I think that when you start to incorporate that into your own songwriting, it's a nice level of maturity in what can, and Matty and I talk about this, and we talk about this sometimes, a level of maturity in what sometimes can be a juvenile genre.
Yeah.
And I say that with love in my heart.
Yeah, that kind of segues into my next question, where I was, I've seen that you guys kind of describe your music as, music that's for fans of like MXPX, The Starting Line, Newfound Glory. And to me, the big difference there is that between you guys and those bands, between like, when you talk about like your lyrical content, the singing, the guitars and all that stuff, you guys seem much more mature and more full. And I like those bands as well, but by and large, their music is geared towards, young adults and high school kids, right? So your music definitely feels a lot more grown up. I mean, would you guys agree with that as well? And then is it because we are grown ups? Like we've been playing punk music for 30 years, right?
I agree with you on that. And the interesting thing is, like, bands like Newfound Glory, they, even their newer stuff kind of tailors to what the older stuff sounds like lyrically, musically. I guess taking some of the influences with that band and bringing some of those elements here lyrically to the more mature, I guess you could say age is part of it, but like I've always wrote more mature lyrics even when I was younger too.
Yeah, it seems weird that like there's 50-year-old people, 45-year-old people still singing to like kids in high school, like they somehow have something in common with them. I'm like, you haven't been in high school in this century. What are you talking about?
I'm there every day.
Yeah.
So Chris is a school teacher, and some of his students actually came to one of our shows. They love it, and it's awesome that they relate to this type of lyrics, this type of music.
And I think that's another thing is like if you don't try to kind of cater to a certain crowd and you just write the music to be good music for like at any point, like 10 years from now it can still be good, 15 years, 30 years ago it could have been good, whatever. And you focus more on making just good music and not trying to play to some sort of like, new thing or, what's rising right now. I think it stands on its own a lot better as well.
I was gonna say, I think that's a nice thing about being a small band. It's funny that we mentioned Newfound Glory is like their new music is tailored to their old stuff almost because they have that expectation, from their existing fan base. So being someone who hasn't been around as long as that, we can kind of do whatever feels right for us.
Yeah, and I think there's, how they always say, like, when an actor gets big for being a comedian or whatever, they get typecast as a certain thing. And that's very true for, bands, right? Like, you can't all of a sudden change your genre or change your sound because then everybody's like, what the hell is this? Like, this isn't what you guys make. It seems weird, though, because, like, when, like, Jim Carrey, for example, played, like, in The Truman Show or, some of his more dramatic stuff, you're like, he's great at this. Like, why can't he go and do this? So why can't Gone Stereo be a prog metal band, right? It doesn't make sense. Like, you can't just switch it up.
Danny's dream.
Yeah.
I like pushing the envelope, different sounds. I like how the band evolved past year with our writing style, bringing Danny aboard. It just, I mentioned before, like those metal style riffs that you don't hear a lot, genre. Like those influences, and just bringing it into this look, which just sounds like more unique.
Yeah, and talking about like pop punk as a genre, like I was saying, it's not one of those genres that you definitely really hear, people being really good musicians in, right? It's usually like the worst musicians are pop punk artists because it's 3 chords, 4 chords, and then the verse, chorus, verse, chorus, whatever, right? Usually that's kind of the way to make a pop punk song. But I think you guys obviously do take it to a next level, like you said, with some synchronized guitars, solos, metal riffs, all that stuff. Kind of like I remember when Sum 41 came out and they were playing metal and it was like pop punk, and you're like, how is that pop punk? That's definitely like metal at most times, right? But it was definitely pop punk because of the way they sang or the way they structured a song. But everything about it was metal. Like the drums were metal, the guitars were metal, the bass was metal, and it was just the singing and the lyrical content was pop punk. So do you think that there's like maybe a way to describe pop punk when it's not simple pop punk? What would be the label that you would use to like talk about it if it's elevated in that kind of way where it's actually like more talented pop punk? Do you think that there should be, or maybe could be, a new label for that?
Yeah, sorry, just give me one real quick. Like, one of the things I'm gonna be annoying and bring up Shakespeare really quick, you know what I mean? And you know, a sonnet has rules that apply to it. You know, there's a frame into which he fit that kind of, like, you know, metaphor, beauty, however you want to talk about it. You know, I'll nerd out on that forever. But you know, did it create a new genre of poetry? I don't really know, but it definitely is, like, that's a poem, but it's a fucking awesome poem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I that's kind of how I'm looking at it a little bit. You know, trying to write the best song that we can. You know, always. That's always been it. You know.
Yeah.
I
Go
think
ahead,
you
Danny.
superseded my point in saying that sometimes it almost doesn't matter. Like, I come more from the progressive and the metal world than the punk world.
Yeah.
And it's like there's so many subgenres that it's almost to a point where it doesn't matter. You know, every band kind of has their own flavor, their own version of it. And it's okay to defy those labels as long as, like Chris said, you're making the best version of whatever it is that you personally can make.
Yeah, it's crazy because when I hear people talk about, like, oh, this isn't that kind of metal, it's this metal, I'm like, what's the difference? I'm like, what's the difference between death metal, thrash metal, all these other ones? I'm like, they all sound exactly the same to me. It's just the singer might be different. That's it. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things that, like, just to kind of frame your guys' music as somebody who hasn't heard it before, I wouldn't put it in like a Blink-182 or like a Newfound Glory style. I'd say it's maybe more like, like Hot Water music, or I don't know. Like, there's other bands that definitely, have the kind of sound that you guys have. It's just most of them don't get to the point where they're, like, incredibly famous because they decided to play that way well after pop punk became famous, right? It was like, oh yeah, now that the genre is dead, everybody can be really good musicians in the genre. What happened? Like, where were they all in the 90s?
I love when other people, like, I always say, oh well, yeah, we're a punk band similar to, like, and then you bring out, like, more music. Like, I love listening to what other people think genre is. But
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to just let other people just make the genre up for us as opposed.
So now let's talk about, obviously, the rise of hardcore, because this is about the only genre that of punk music specifically that hasn't really had its heyday. So, the new wave of punk seems to be getting the most traction. Again, like I said, is hardcore. You got bands like Turnstile, Military Gun, Knocked Loose, a lot of other bands coming up. Each of these, bands and each of these kinds of, or everybody in this kind of genre has different various levels of intensity. Like, Turnstile is not the same as Knocked Loose, right? Like, those are two different bands in the same genre, or respectively the same genre, but they all kind of still fit together. But what's your guys' take on the rise of hardcore punk, and why is it kind of becoming even for rock music, it's kind of like becoming quickly like the most relevant, I guess, rock music genre right now?
I think maybe I think it has to do with the idea, I don't want to say each thing has to be a little bit heavier, more extreme. That's because that's not the right thing, because a lot of those bands have, like, killer hooks as well in their vocal melodies and their their riffs. But is it the next logical extension of, like, Newfound Glory plus Blink-182, crossed with a little bit of, like, John Feldman production? Is that what that turns into? And I don't really know. I think those are all, like, positive things, and then it's up to the kind of the audience to decide. If that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah.
I think in general, music has just trended to become a little bit more heavier, with the advent of more all the different kinds of metals that have come out, from gent to progressive and everything in between. So I think punk has maybe gone the same way in a general sense, that we've in this genre have gone a little bit heavier as the trend has gone a little bit heavier.
Yeah.
Or is it hardcore incorporating, like, the cool poppy part of pop punk into that? I mean, but then again, like, I listened to Start Today by the Gorilla Biscuits, which was like mid to late 80s came out, and there's all that kind of layers of history involved, I guess you could say.
The music itself, I think, kind of is that progression of punk music, but hardcore hasn't been gone. It never was like, it's not like it was created, right? Like it's been in the scene of punk music for years, but for whatever reason, in the 80s, it didn't become mainstream. Even in the 90s, when pop punk became big, hardcore didn't become a mainstream thing. You know, I think maybe there's some acceptance of it at older ages for us now because we grew up as, you know, punk loving fans. But at the same time, we didn't want to beat the shit out of each other like the kids these days are, like, you know, and they're just thrashing around and kicking and not even aiming where they're swinging, right? But I think maybe there is that somewhat of an acceptance going from, like, you know, like obviously in the 50s, like Elvis was risque, right? Like controversial, like you can't put him on TV. Like, what are you talking about? This dude is just like dancing. That's ridiculous. But then it was like, you know, the 90s, were they ready for hardcore to be, you know, mainstream or whatever? Maybe it's finally time 30 years after that explosion that hardcore could be the thing. Again, it's one of those things. This genre's been around, but I think it's finally getting its time. And I think there is that level of, you know, and I don't like to say this because with every band, it's not the same, right? But like, I feel like if there's that one band that has, you know, a decent looking person as their front person, right? They're just not like a hideous human being. Then all of a sudden that can elevate a genre, right? Like, you know, Blink-182 helped the pop punk, and, you know, because a lot of pop punk bands were just guys, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that Blink-182 supermodels, but they're good looking dudes. Like, they're taking their clothes off and chicks are like, yes, now we can finally like pop punk music too, right? So maybe Turnstile helps that. Maybe Militarie Gun helps that in a way that kind of incorporates, you know, not having just like a bunch of like older dudes yelling into a microphone, right? So I don't know. Did you have any kind of thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, first of all, we're a bunch of handsome dudes, so we're set for that, aren't we? Yeah, no, I agree. I think, you know, I don't know that hardcore ever left, to your point. I think that, you know, myself, I know that was one of my earliest influences, to be honest, probably before getting into, you know, whatever we're dubbing pop punk at this point. But yeah, no, I think 100% aesthetics has a lot to do with it. I think that, you know, people like the cute boys. So, and if they can scream loud and be heavy, it's even cooler, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, what if here's just one other thing. What if those are just the kids that are really good at like TikTok and interneting? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And like using the technology that we're kind of dinosaurs at this point, like to their advantage in the best possible way. That, you know, why does something go viral? I don't know. I don't know. Is there something to that too?
Yeah, and I can agree. Like TikTok seems to be one of these, you know, social media platforms where somebody can literally become famous overnight and change their music career. Does that mean that they're always going to be successful long term? Probably not, but they can go from like nothing to somebody in a very short period of time, right? Instagram kind of did that, but it seems like once the pandemic came and TikTok was like the most relevant social media platform for kids under like 25, then it seems like that kind of became this new trigger for, you know, becoming viral and becoming famous. And it's like, one thing I've noticed is, you know, like these bands that have, or even just artists that have, you know, 3 million TikTok followers, and then they go and play a show and they can't fill a 200 seat, venue. And it's like, well, yeah, because they didn't want to come see you. Like they can watch you online. You put everything that you do on there and it's like more intimate and personal. Now they have to drive somewhere, pay money to go see you. Most of the time, they're not going to do that, right? So it kind of has that flip side of the coin. Like internet fame doesn't seem to translate to financial success unless there's something to truly back it up. So kind of in the same vein as you can be a good looking guy, but if your band sucks, it's not going to matter, right? Or vice versa. If your band's great and you're a bunch of ugly dudes, you still might be unsuccessful, whatever, right? But, you know, do you think that maybe, and I kind of wrote a little joke in here for the little outline, but I was saying like, you know, when kids are out there like moshing, because that's the other part of it, right? It's got to be played live for kids to kind of understand how this genre and how this music is reflecting upon their emotional and concert going experience, right? So they're out there kicking and punching and don't seem to care. You know, is this kind of what happens when kids eat too many Tide Pods, or is this just a form of expression like the new Fight Club sentiment from the late 90s?
But, you know, if you think about it, what's going on in the world, and, you know, there's a lot of things that probably are triggering kids to need to take out some aggression, right, in some capacity. And to me, it's not a bad way to do it. I think there's other ways that could be much, much worse. But yeah, I don't know. And yeah, and then the Tide Pods too. Yeah, probably.
I gave up on those a long time ago.
Even still, like since we even started 30 years ago, Matty, kids have been, and you know, Mike, you were in a different part of the state, but you know, kids were gathering in shady places and doing, you know, risky things in front of their friends' bands. Whatever those risky things were, jumping off of whatever the fuck was there, or, you know, so I guess now it's just filmed all the time. And I say that to my students, like, oh shit, like if there was a digital camera there in the 1990s, and basement shows we probably played together, Matty, do I want anybody seeing that footage, or would I be super famous now because of it? You know what I mean? I don't know.
You're talking, Mike, about like what's going on in the world, right? Like, you know, there's a lot of protests about like Palestine and Israel and a lot of other stuff, you know, not just that, but, you know, politics as well. And, you know, it's I think it is one of the, even though they're like fake fighting essentially, or pseudo fighting, even though they might hit each other, it feels like that's safer than them going out and, you know, actually expressing their anger in a way that could be very violent or very dangerous for people who aren't expecting it, right? Like going out and mugging people, or, you know, whatever. I'm not saying punk rock leads to mugging people, but I think that it's kind of the opposite, right? Like punk rock keeps people from mugging people. So I think there's kind of that. I think everybody needs a form of release for whatever anxieties and angst and emotional trauma that they might have. And yeah, I think music is usually a good avenue, even if you are dancing like a crazed person out there, right?
Couldn't agree with you more.
Now, do you think that the next step for hardcore is that it actually has the ability to get popular enough to where like mainstream, it's like when one band like Turnstile comes up, do you think that there will be a kind of like whirlwind effect where these other bands start upstreaming with them and it actually becomes like a pretty popular genre? I know tons of, you know, hardcore bands, but I haven't seen many of them getting the attention. I mean, Military Gun might be the second biggest one right now, and they're not really a hardcore band, to be honest with you. They jokingly called themselves that, and now they kind of are lumped in as hardcore. But I think those Turnstile and Military Gun might be the two biggest, but I don't see the genre being swept up yet. And maybe it's because Turnstile has to release yet another album, or, you know, Military Gun's released 2 in 2 years. Turnstile, I think, has had 1 in like 3 years. And the one before that was like 5 years before that. So I don't know if they, like, you know, when Blink-182 released Enema of the State, it was like, boom, now this big second wave of pop punk all of a sudden hit again. Do you think that might happen if Turnstile releases another album and other bands start getting upstreamed with them?
Yeah, so it's always possible. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like you said before, like, you know, what's the crowd they're catering to? Like older, like us, or, you know, is the younger fan gonna want to listen to that type, or are they seeking something else? You know, so
Yeah.
I really don't know.
And
Yeah.
I think popular is subject to, you know, interpretation. To Chris's point, well, as you guys were saying earlier, you have like 250,000 followers and then have 20 people show up at your show.
Yeah.
So like, what is popular? Is popular 250,000 followers, or is it having, you know, 400 people show up at your show, right? Like the days of MTV popularity are gone, I think. So really, what is it? Is it like what you're selling? Is it how many people are following you? And
Yeah.
you know, it's all up to interpretation.
And
Yeah, I think
on Long Island alone, you know, very, very popular hardcore scene here. And most of all the hardcore shows always sell out. So, you know, It's possible. So I can see it not, throughout the rest of the world or country, but it is very.
So to Matty's point again, there are a number of bands that are, I think, kind of, not far behind bands like Military Gun in terms of popularity, because they're starting to open shows for all those bands. The guys in Standstill, I mean, Pain of Truth was like a pandemic project for one of the other LIHC guys that they're playing all over the world now. They just opened an arena tour for I can't remember who, but they just opened an arena tour. Standstill is touring all over the place, going to Japan. What are some of the other
Oil, who's up
Yep.
pretty big now.
They're
also
so I mean they're if you see video of their shows, it's all crazy.
Yeah.
What the ceiling is, who knows? Do they have that crossover hook that is going to get everybody? Because that's really, again, it always are the songs. It's always the things that are super, super catchy that, I feel
I think that's a good point, because like you were saying, Mike, as well, MTV days are gone. MTV doesn't even play music anymore. It's like it's 24 hours of ridiculousness. It's like, I don't know what's going on there, but I don't get it. Like every time I turn it on, it's just straight 24 hours of that. But yeah, I think that, even radio, right? Radio doesn't have the translation of success that it used to. Like if you were on radio back in the 90s, that was a big break for you, right? Now it's like, who gives a shit if you're on the radio? Like what they play now is like, I don't want to listen to the radio, right? So like if they actually played good music, maybe I would listen to the radio more, but streaming is way more popular than the radio. So, even radio stations are basically streaming just to terrestrial audiences, right? Through an antenna instead of putting it through your computer. So it is kind of hard to define that success, but I think typically, what we would say is what's successful is how much money do you generate from your music, right? I think that kind of translates to, can you live off your music? Can you actually go out and live a comfortable life and without having a second job, right? So I think if more bands could do that, even if it's hardcore punk, great. I think, maybe one day rock music will make a comeback to the point where people can be in bands and pay their bills by just playing the music that they actually play, right? So to me, that's why I do this podcast. That's why I have guys like you come on and talk about punk music, because it's like, has everybody forgotten that punk music is still really good, or what the hell's going on? Like, it's been good for 50 years, and people just forget that it's been around that long, and then they kind of weave in and out of the popularity, like the popular bands of the times, and it's like, oh, well, now I don't have to listen to it for another decade. You're like, okay. It's like, what the hell's going on? But yeah, I think, when I talk about successful, popular, whatever you want to say it is, yeah, I mean, if you have 3 million followers on YouTube, can you turn that into monetary compensation, right? Like, can you turn your TikTok into something that makes money? And most people don't know how to do that. Most people are like, well, I've got a lot of followers. Okay, well, how does that help you? Can you sell a record? Can you sell, can you do advertisements? Can you license, other people's products? I don't know, but like, there's ways you could make money from it, obviously. And I think that's where maybe the next wave of music or musicians might go is, Patreon and, doing all these things where they can actually have subscribers that pay them a monthly fee just so that they don't have to go out and get a job, right? I think for bands these days, that like Twitch live streams and stuff like that are pretty big. I think, I'm not saying that they're going to make a lot of money from it, but I think it's a big concept that if you start doing it and do it well, 4, 5, 6 years, maybe that's going to be the thing that keeps people, from having to get jobs, is just doing stuff on the internet, right? So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out, but everybody's waiting for the next, hey, how do you become famous again? Or how do you become successful again? What's the next blueprint? Because record labels don't give a shit about you until you actually have the business rolling, right? And by then it's like, well, do we need you? Because we already have the business. Like, we already make the money. I think, the other parts of the, like punk becoming mainstream again or having success again is, in reality, a lot of punk bands have to face that it's very difficult to bring something fresh and new to a genre that kind of perfected itself 30 years ago, right? Like pop punk was so big in the 90s that everywhere you looked, you saw a band playing that style of music and playing it really well and becoming very successful at it. So, you guys even have to compare yourselves in some way to a lot of the bands in the 90s. You don't even get to say like, hey, we're a lot like this band from 5 years ago or this band that's currently popular, because no one would know who you're talking about, right? They'd be like, I don't know who that is. Like, what do you mean? Like, copyrights? I don't know. Like, you guys sound like the copyrights, but who the hell would know who the copyrights are unless they're actually a fan of the band, right? So, do you feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill in the sense that fans seem to only want to hear pop punk music from already well-known bands?
I don't think so. I don't know how anybody else feels about it.
I think there's a place for what we do. I don't know that's necessarily mass appeal at the moment, but I definitely think there's a place for it. I think there's people it's interesting, right? Because we've got people in our demographic, like dudes pushing 50, dad types. But then we also see like, younger people starting to like come on into it and just really relating to that. So I think there's hope. But yeah, I'd say it's like pushing a medium-sized boulder up a hill.
Yeah. I think there's always a boulder up a hill with rock music in general right now. But yeah.
The thing that's difficult is getting people to come out and see something that they might not necessarily know. Like, and this is the thing, like, people are going to go see the bands that they've known since the 90s because it's already a part of their life. They have an established relationship with their music. It means something to them. And the boulder that we're pushing up the hill is getting people to come out and try something new, to spend money to see a show for people that they haven't seen and to discover something and to take a chance on it. And I think that's wherein the boulder lies, is that's a difficulty.
Yeah, I always say that comfortable people are the hardest to move, right? Like, try to get somebody off the couch. They're comfortable. Like, they're just like, ugh. Like, come on, let's go. Let's get off the couch. Let's go see a show. And they're like, nah. Like, I already know what I like. I don't need to like anything new. Like, those are the worst kinds of people to like try to even have a conversation with because they don't want to change their mind about anything. So I totally know what you mean.
I think
that's where I feel like technology also hurts too, because like, to Chris's point before, everybody videos now, everything. You don't even want to leave your house. You can just go on TikTok or YouTube and type in Gone Stereo and you see the show instead of going there. Even like the concerts I've been to recently, and everyone has a phone up that's recording, like not really enjoying the actual experience, like how he did, like when he used to go back in the day with no phones. We just like enjoyed that experience.
And I even catch myself doing it too. Also, like I've caught myself saying, "Oh yeah, they put it on a great live show. I've seen it on the internet, and I've never seen them live. So how do I know? How do I know what I'm going to go see? And I've never seen it myself."
Yeah. And like to your point, Danny, like another big thing on Long Island is loads of cover bands. Like very, very
they always
big
do well.
Cover bands.
They do,
and they do, because like I said, they cater to the songs they already know. Like, how would he get them to come out to listen to something original or new? It's a challenge. So I agree with you.
I once had a boss / business partner tell me, he's like, I don't even understand why people play their own music. Why don't they just all play cover songs? That's what people want to hear. I was like, where the fuck do you think the cover song originally came from? They had to write an original song, you dickhead.
I think what makes it even more difficult to a degree too is that the small venue is rapidly being killed off. Like, we just had a dearth of popular venues close in Long Island, New York City in the last couple months, places that bands like us can go and play. Like, we lost like 4 or 5 of them, like almost all at the same time. And that makes it even harder to get people because now you have less venues. That means less acts can be there. And those venues are going to want to be able to stay open to make the money. So what are they going to do? Are they going to take a chance on a band that's original or go with a sure shot of someone that already plays something that's established?
Yeah, and especially like, I always bring this up about DJs, right? Because you can hire a DJ that just plays popular music, pay that one person like $200, or you have to, that person can make $200 for themselves, or like a band of 5 people have to go and try to make the $200 and split it 5 ways. And it's like, does this even make sense anymore? Is this financially like responsible in any way? Like, why are we still doing this?
It's never been financially responsible.
Why do you think we all have jobs?
But yeah, I was just, it's crazy that like the way that music industry has gone, it's a rival for venues, it's a rival for people's attention, it's a rival for technology. Like you said, a lot of these things make it very difficult to kind of crack the code on how the hell do you get somebody to pay attention to you anymore and make them stick around, right? Because like, sure, they can listen to a song once, but are they going to stick around for another song, another launch, another release, whatever, right? So it is kind of that weird part of being successful that most people I guess they just either they get impatient or they get frustrated, and most people just won't do it for a very long time. But then the ones that stick around usually get some modicum of success, like being able to tour, being able to go on the road, play in festivals and stuff like that. There's a certain level of success in that too. Like, you don't have to necessarily be rich and famous, but you can at least be more well known than you were. You could be regionally well known or nationally well known or whatever, right? So I think there's some level of that too. Just getting out there, being around other bands is pretty helpful. And I know you guys play shows. Obviously, you got the Bitters and Distractions and the Something Bitter shirts. These are other bands. I think they're both Long Island bands, right? I know Bitters and Distraction is. So that's another thing, just like networking with other bands to get in there.
Something Bitter is like more Queens, I think. I think Queens is in Long Island.
I mean, it's
Gotcha.
geographically Long Island, so if anyone in Queens would, people in Queens will, like, we just started a fight that a lot of people don't recognize by saying that Queens is part of Long Island, because them are fighting words.
So what do you guys think it will take for up and coming bands to kind of break through to a wider audience? Is it this technology? Is it, just virality, or do you think that fans will actually come around, or do you believe that pop punk is just going to have to live with the fact that this genre is more for the love of music than making it a career from now on?
I can't imagine like how it is now, being older, being younger. I remember when I was younger, I'd be on the road and 6 months out of the year, it's like I just been left 6 months, and it's like panhandling my CD on the streets for $5-10, and then no guarantees sometimes venues, but like getting out there and hustling. Like lately you see like nowadays bands go out, say they're going on tour, and it's like 5 shows. I mean, it's still a tour, but it's not a real tour. How much money are you really making? Like, I don't think bands make a lot of money these days, whatever genre it is, without getting out there and actually doing anything about it. But it's just thinking it off.
I also think that maybe that became the model really quick, doing those quick 4 or 5 show things, because it is unsustainable to do a whole month, because who the fuck is going to go to, who's like I love Nostalgia, but who's going to show up to Nostalgia on Tuesday to see original music?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like Ann Arbor, Michigan, or wherever.
Exactly. And like, so you think about that kind of thing, and it totally makes sense for a band like us to try to get like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing, hopefully matinee on Sunday, so we get to fucking work on Monday morning. But but like something like that, I think might be a little bit more financially viable. I don't know, because the revenue stream for album sales is no longer there. There's no longer any of that other kind of stuff. So that's only the way I saw it, but I could be wrong, because what the hell do I know?
Yeah.
I'm going to work tomorrow morning.
I think we live in we're going to get soapboxy. I think we live in a culture, a society that undervalues art in general, that artists are called starving artists because it's not a place that allows a forum to make a living off of it unless you sort of sell yourself out, right? Like, I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, the guys who aren't banking and all that other shit are the guys making money, and the people are, kind of putting their nose to the grindstone and getting out there and creating things are having to scrape to make a living. So I think it's a bigger sort of commentary on what is valued in our country.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true, because even if you talk to a venue owner, like they're like, I could have just played the radio instead of hiring you guys, right? Like, it's like, well, people will come for a band. Like, they'll, like, if you consistently play live music and it's good live music, even if it's unknown live music, people will come to a bar that is known for live music and pay a cover and, hang out there for a couple hours. So yes, the bands should be compensated accordingly, right? Like there's a place here in Las Vegas called Red Dwarf, which is a really cool tiki bar. And they actually, they don't charge a cover, but they consistently have live music. And that's one of the more popular bars in town. They don't even have gambling in that bar, which is very rare for a bar in Las Vegas, because almost everybody has to make money off of their gambling to stay open. They don't do that, but they consistently have live music, and people show up. Like there will be, 65 people in there on a Thursday or a Wednesday or even a Sunday night just to watch bands play. And it's like, that's awesome. Like it took a while for it to get to a point where like people were showing up consistently. But I think that, you have to have a venue owner who knows that this is actually something that's valuable, right? And like the artists themselves have a story to tell, and that's their music, right? Like, a painter can tell, can put something on a canvas and we have no idea what the hell they're trying to say. But in music, they're literally we're saying out loud, like, this is what we're trying to say. Like you can hear the words, right? Like as long as you agree with that, you're gonna have a good time, right? So I think you're right. Like, it's not just venue owners that devalue it, obviously, but that's one of the other key problems is like venues and venue owners actually being willing to commit to a long-term business model of playing live music in their facilities, right? Because a lot of them will be like, well, I don't want to drive away the dinner crowd. It's like, fuck are you talking about?
We've seen that. Well, even like Nashville, right? You think that place has been born and bred on musicians and talent. I was there last year and speaking with musicians who are killing it, like the most talented people I've ever seen in the world. They're like, yeah, we work on tips. We work on tips, right?
That's
so
crazy.
even the venue owners, they're the ones raking in, all the people buying the booze, but it's dependent upon the patrons to pay the band for the experience they have. So they've created this sort of ecosystem that is not dependent on the venues or the owners there. It's dependent on the people coming into the venues. And it's like a dangling carrot, right, for these bands. Like, we got to do this to get big. And they're in this hamster wheel
I think
forever.
what you're talking about is
you gotta play the organ, you little monkey. Like,
I think what you're talking about is there's the debate. I was watching, I think it was, I don't know if anyone knows Rainn Wilson, the actor. He has his own podcast, and he was interviewing Bryan Cranston. They were talking about this. It's like, and Bryan Cranston was saying, like, when I started out, I did everything I could to get noticed, to get seen, and I did all these things that aren't who I am, and I never got seen until I started doing who I am and my own thing. And I think it's what you're starting to see is a shift in more bands populating that do-it-yourself model, because that seems to be the only way to do it sustainably. And because the more original you can be, and the more successful you could be, where you're not sharing costs and you're not sharing profits, that seems to be the model. Like I just saw, and this is going to be the least punk rock I'll say in this podcast. I saw the band Lawrence the other night, and they're sort of like a soul R&B kind of funk band, but they're 100% DIY. And one of the things they were talking about is like, we're a band that 5-10 years ago we were playing college, house parties. And, everyone in the band has a different job. Like the saxophone player is the tour manager, the drummer does all the merch, like everyone does something, and they share all the responsibilities. And that means that the band does not have to share profits with anyone. And, they just sold out Radio City Music Hall. And that seems to be the model. And they're doing something original and unique, like it's derivative of a genre, but they have something that stands out in who their, lead singers are. So it seems to be like bands today, like you kind of have to speak your own truth. You have to be who you are and not try to fit a mold. And then it seems to be like that do-it-yourself model is the only way that, you don't get, I don't want to say screwed out of, but you're able to retain everything that you make.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting now that when you want to start a band, you also have to start a business, right? Like it didn't used to be that way. Like you could just be in a band for like 5 years, and then if you got signed, then you would have like some sort of business set up, right? But now it's like, well, in order to eliminate expenses, stop paying taxes on things so that we actually are putting into the band, like we have to set up an LLC like pretty much right away. It's like, that's crazy. Like that never even used to be a consideration for bands back in the 90s. Like now it's like, yes, I don't want to have to pay this all out of pocket. I want it to be, an expense of the band, which is for the band, right? Like, and then if you put gas in the tank, okay, that's a band expense. We got to make that back. And so you also have to find band members who can play instruments and sing and write and all that stuff. But you also have to sit there and go like, what are your other talents? Like, do you know how to do accounting? Do you know anything
Do you
about
know how to draw up a
distribution?
legal document?
Yeah, it's just very interesting because, you know, like a lot of the things that, you know, I was in a punk band when I was in high school, never would have even considered like, oh, you made money. Like, do you have to pay taxes? It wouldn't even cross my mind. Like, I think we made like a couple $100 in the, you know, year that we were a band. I'm like, would have never considered like that's income. Like that's the most laughable form of income. But like if you're you know, talking about like as an adult, you have a side project and it's a band and you're spending, you know, $4,000 on it to operate, and you're only making $2,000. Well, you legally want to have those taxes written off, or those expenses written off for taxes, right? So like, yeah, makes sense. And then obviously if you do make money, you don't want to get audited and then go to prison, so you got to pay the taxes on it. But I don't know why we started talking about taxes, but you know, it's one of those things.
I just decided I'm going to buy more guitars and fucking charge them to the band. So here we go.
I need this one. It's only $2,500. Come on. Prince touched it once. I'm good. Let's go. Well, kind of the last question on this before we kind of talk about a little bit more about you guys, but do you think that punk music being popular goes against its own ethos, as so many gatekeepers pointed out back when it exploded in the 90s? You know, punk isn't about being famous or popular or, you know, making a lot of money. It is, like you said, Danny, it is very DIY, you know, culture, right? Like from the inception of punk, it was like do it yourself, get people around you to kind of buy in, you know, create zines and all these other things that, like, you know, spread the community and the word. Obviously, as you know, older, you know, I'm 42. I know you guys are around that age or a little older as well. Not everybody's the same age, obviously, but, you know, we're not going to start our own zine to, like, you know, uproot and create a new cultural, you know, identity inside of, you know, Long Island or Las Vegas punk music. But there are kids out there that are doing it, right? So, like, I think there is a way to fit the newer, you know, bands and stuff like that to match with the kind of older bands and like have them cross over, so that way it does create a bigger community, right? Do you think, you know, that is kind of the new success, or is it really just like, hopefully somebody's going to break it big on radio and then everybody else kind of follows through?
Yeah, a little both.
I think if the radio or whatever version of that, like whatever thing makes people successful and can upstream people, if it is TikTok, if it is Instagram, if somebody does that for pop punk, I think, you know, everybody said, oh, Machine Gun Kelly is bringing pop punk back. I'm like, name one other artist that came up with him. Like, he didn't bring back anything. He just made a different album and put it and said it was pop punk. I was like, he was there to make money for himself. He wasn't there to try to help a genre or, you know, play with punk bands, right? He was just like, I'm going to do something different. If you don't like it, suck it, I guess. But you're going to buy 10 million of these copies of this album or whatever. But do you guys think it's still going to be DIY until something kind of lottery style kind of breaks again?
I do. I do.
I tend to think that everything is really fractured now, and it's cool because, you know, I think of like 15 different genres that have the word like lo-fi in it. You know what I mean? You have lo-fi new wave, lo-fi synth pop new wave, lo-fi bedroom synth pop new wave. You know what I mean? And they're all different things. And are you? And I think you said it earlier. Like, are you like living your truth? Are you putting your authentic self down? And I'm gonna say tape, and I know it's fucking not tape anymore. Like, are you putting it down on tape? Are you being honest? And I think that that's what like is behind that whole sellout bullshit in the 90s. Is there was this idea that people would have to be dishonest to find success, not that success found the genre. Because that's kind of like, you know, in retrospect, probably what happened. You know, success found the genre, not those bands didn't go out like, I feel like, let's go be popular. They wanted to play music, and you know, I think Fat Mike had a quote. They didn't change. Like, their music became popular. People just started liking what they did.
Yeah,
it makes sense to me, you know.
Yeah, and I call that, the difference between that is when you sell out, you do something that you wouldn't normally do for money. But when you do the same thing and get famous, that's called other people buying in. So selling out versus buying in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's called success. You know, that's what it is. It's, you know.
Yeah.
do what you love and make a couple bucks. Why not? You know?
Yeah. I mean, if Portugal the Man goes out and does a Taco Bell commercial and all they have to do is license the music that they already created, who gives a shit? Like, go out and make $1 million from Taco Bell. But if you have to make a Taco Bell jingle, maybe don't do that.
Different story. Yeah.
I love burritos. All right. So let's talk about you guys for a little bit more, because obviously you're here. You guys have put some songs out already online, and I know you guys have a new single. I heard it. It's fucking awesome. But let's talk about, I think you guys have maybe like 10 or 11, maybe 12 songs out there. You guys haven't put together an actual album as far as I've seen, but, basically releasing digitally, streaming and stuff like that. So what do you guys have on the way? And you guys got shows and all that other, anything like that coming up that you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, we have that single that you listened to coming out next Friday. We worked with Frank from Lynam Studios out here in Port Jefferson. Very awesome guy. Studio is great. The sound we had with these new songs are a little different than the other one. The other two songs are going to actually be featured on Split. We're going to do a split with another band, Something Bitter. So
Nice.
They're actually in the process of finishing up their two songs. So maybe late winter we have another two coming out. I love these last three songs personally, like my favorite out of the whole catalog so far. I think everyone else agree.
You're like, nope, I fucking hate the direction of this band. I'm out.
And also,
By the way,
and the band evolved too, in the very beginning when we first started, we had Jay, who's the drummer, who's no longer with us, got Danny, and, the evolution and the way things are going sounds great. I'm looking forward to Fridays. I heard a lot of great feedback so far. A lot of people like Pitch to Two, a lot of playlisters are putting on the playlists coming up, so I'm excited for the song.
Yeah, we'll tell everybody what the single is called so that they know what to look for.
It's called Meet Me at Garvies.
Meet me at Garvies, yeah.
Yeah, that can be left up to interpretation. Garvies Point is a town on Long Island. Musically, the song was written around the town, Garvies Point. Lyrically, it's a little different than that, but it's left up to interpretation.
Yeah, I remember when you sent it to me, you're like, let me know if it's any good. And I was like, this is fucking, when I try to explain to people like, oh, what kind of music do you like? I'll just say like, listen to this song. This is a very good example of the exact kind of music I like, because it's high energy. It's got good like instrumentation. It's not afraid to get loud and then get quiet and then, go kind of take in a little bit of a roller coaster. It's got a little bit of everything. So I was like, holy shit, like this is like a whole album in one song. This is fantastic. So yeah.
Appreciate that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then everybody will listen to it now and then be like, that guy's full of shit. He lied to us. It's a terrible song.
Well,
or he's got terrible taste in music.
we'll say something funny, and I threw it to the guys not a couple days ago. A couple people I submitted to, it's personal taste, but one person wasn't a fan of the long intro. How there's such a long instrumental intro before the lyrics start. Again, I think, like you said, it has so much dynamics in the song where it's building up on certain things, and I think maybe the newer listener really not listening for that.
Sure.
I don't know.
That person has clearly never listened to Tool with long intros.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, I think people are going to like the song. It's very, it is, I don't sit there and say like, this is classified as what I would call pop punk. This is like something a little different, maybe, a blend of genres like emo, pop rock, power pop, and pop punk. So like a lot of pop in there, but that's a good thing. Like the reason why it's called pop is because it's popular, right? So I think a lot of people will enjoy listening to this song specifically, and all the songs. You guys, it's not like this is the first song you've put out that sounds like this or is, this good. They're pretty much, I just sat 2 days ago and went through the whole catalog twice, mostly because I had it on and I was just listening to it, and then it was still going and I was like, oh, I already listened to all these songs already. That's cool. So yeah, it's definitely something that you can enjoy in the background, or you can, enjoy while you're listening to it intently as well. All right. And then you guys have, did you say you have shows coming up as well? I don't remember. Maybe you said that. I don't know.
Yeah, we have a pretty busy, I would say busy October coming up. We have our next show is October 3rd. We're playing in Brooklyn, playing with Calling All Captains, the Goalkeeper,
Nice.
Billy, Jam Poetry Band.
Killer bands.
Yeah, looking forward to that. It's going to be a really good show. Most of the shows in Brooklyn and the area we're playing at called Meadow Street. Very good scene over there. You got a lot going on. And then we're playing like a Halloween show, a basement show, ironically, that we talked about before. So looking forward to that. Cause I love basement shows. I love in your face shows. I don't like really standing on the stage. I like being in the crowd. You guys like kind of like, oh, are you gonna jump on the floor again? It's like that. Yeah, I just like being engaged with everybody.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else we have going on in October. There's another October. We play a bar called Mr. Beery's. Right, been around for a long time on Long Island. Playing there.
That's one of the places that made their name on always having live music.
I could be wrong though.
Otto's Shrunken Head.
Oh
You
yeah,
got that coming up.
Shrunken Head in New York City. That's playing Benny and the Hooligans. Also from Queens, Long Island.
Yeah. I was just going to say, for all the people that don't know Calling All Captains, and I'm not like I'm not a huge fan. Like, it's not that I don't like their music. They're good. I just haven't like dug into them as often as some other bands. But their tour right now, they just done like a whole countrywide tour. And every single time I see the bill, I'm like, I like all those supporting bands. I'm like, how is it that this one band has all the bands that I like across America supporting them? And I'm like, that's pretty cool. If you're going to a Calling All Captains show, you're also going to like all the support.
Yeah, I think it's great that like Calling All Captains, like their booking agent or the promoters, like they allow like local openers and all the support groups. I mean, that's how you do it. That's the way to go with showcase. Like there's been, or even like being back in the day on tour, and I would see these bands and they would blow you away. And you're like, how are you not noticed? It's crazy. And I'm sure there's so many out there now.
I think to call back to an earlier part of the conversation, I think that's a way to get noticed these days. Is to just get on shows and just get seen, and try to connect your following with someone else's following.
Yeah, I think, whatever, I think a really big help is if a band has any sort of notoriety, don't take another band that's unknown across the country with you, right? Like go take the bands that are in that scene, and then you can expand your base in there by bringing on the local scene with a national scene, right? Like, if I always see it like, I'll say mid-level bands. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I think maybe like the last Hot Mulligan tour, it was like them and then one other band, and then, or maybe two other bands, and it was like, that was their national tour. I was like, why don't you have other bands from the scene like opening up for you guys instead of blocking it off and saying, well, we're going to sell 900 tickets or 1,000 tickets either way, let's go ahead and just do our own thing. It's like, yeah, it's great for those two bands to be going on a national tour with Hot Mulligan or whatever, but at the same time, it's like, how cool is it to have at least one local band on that bill as well? So yeah,
I totally agree.
The last thing I want to ask, there's going to be two questions here, but the last thing that I want to ask you guys is, if you guys had a magic wand and could create a perfect balance for punk music's popularity, what would that look like?
I think for me, it would be people being willing to take a chance on someone new and going out on a, whatever, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, see a band you haven't seen before, go out, experience something new, discover something. Instead of relying on Spotify's discovery playlist to do it for you, do some of the work yourself. Go find your own new music.
Yeah, those algorithms seem to feed you the same things over and over. It's like, I don't want to keep listening to this song every week, you jackass. Like, come on now.
Selfishly, for me, it would be enough to make a living, even if it's a meager living. Just, something that would provide the opportunity to just do that.
Yeah. And I think Europe and Japan and some of these other countries, they do allow that for musicians, right? Like it's not like it's an insane thing to be popular and a newer band in the 21st century, right? And make money, because European bands do it, like Japanese bands, Korean bands do it, like why can't American bands do it, right? So Yeah, it's not crazy. So I think that's a good one as well, because I think if that's always my goal, to help, raise visibility for bands so that they can just pay the bills on the music, right? So like that's why one of the big reasons why I started this. Hell, if I could just make a living off of doing this podcast, that would be
That's the dream,
fantastic.
isn't it?
So, yeah.
Exactly.
So then on the other side of this, instead of being able to create a better future, let's say you guys have a crystal ball and can just observe the future of punk music. What do you guys see?
I tend to think it's gonna be. I mean, it's always gonna be about like the songs and the honesty of feeling and the kind of courage and safety to be yourself, and that's kind of what I hope it will remain. And I hope that, I know looking back, it's always like a little rose colored, but I feel like if that remains in the ethos, shall we say, then everything is going to work out okay.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, what's going to happen in the future? You guys are going to lose more hair. We're going to get older. We're going to all be more grumpy. Danny's still going to have, enough hair for all of us, so it'll be fine.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Maybe I'll just get grumpy.
You guys really upped your follicle count. Yeah. I think you're right. Like in an optimistic world, punk music still is punk music, is allowed to be, truthful and sincere, right? Because there's not, pop music in itself isn't sincere. It's usually watered down versions of what you really want to say, right? But punk music has never really been that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And challenging status quo and keeping
I
people
think
on
punk
their
is
toes.
about asking.
Yeah.
Always something
It's
to
about
watch
asking
out.
the right questions and not being afraid to say it.
Any other shout outs or anything you guys want to say before we go today?
We always just like to shout out to all our friends that we always play with, bands like Bitters and Distraction, Something Bitter, Half Dizzy, Playing Dead, all our friends. Steve and the Not Steves, all those guys.
Steve and the Not Steves. I like that band name.
Pilot Program.
Nice.
Lunacy Commission.
Yeah. Lunacy Commission.
Yeah.
So
There's
many
also
good
a
bands.
lot of great bands that we've been playing with. That we definitely check them out. Really,
It's all great bands and great friends.
yes.
And then obviously,
Suppository, our roommate.
are you guys going to do a crossover where you guys start adding horns to your band?
Hey, you never know.
We'll
right.
see. Maybe we'll schedule practice on the same night, see what happens.
Yeah. And I won't tell any of your guys' family that you didn't give them a shout out, so don't worry, and they won't
I don't know.
watch it.
You
It's
probably
fine.
heard my son running around upstairs. He just came home a little bit ago, so I apologize if you all heard that.
Yeah, it's all good. I have a 3.5-year-old. I'm surprised he has not banged on my door at all. He usually is pretty good, but he is crazy as hell for sure. That's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you learned anything or liked what you heard on the show today, please show us some support and subscribe to this channel and like, comment, and share this video with a friend or put it up on social media. I hate to keep asking, but without those small actions, the YouTube bots pretty much ignore this channel. Putting these videos out is a lot of work, and if you want to show your appreciation, please consider purchasing some of our musical accessories or merch from our store at poweredbyrock.com. You can read our blog and follow us in the links below as well. Those are the plugs, and that's all I have. I'll see you soon for the next episode. Until then, rock on.